With so many talents doing their thing on AEW programming over the last 5 years, insert jokes about Tony Khan hiring every single wrestler under the sun here, it was always going to be tough to remember each and every star who has ever ran the All Elite ropes or walked out the AEW tunnels. These are just a few of those long-forgotten names who once wrestled for AEW. I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 forgotten AEW wrestlers you totally don't remember. Number 10, Danny Limelight. Danny Limelight goes under the spotlight. Indie regular Danny joined the AEW train in 2021 and immediately nailed down a spot for himself on lower-end programming like Dark and Dark Elevation. He wrestled 18 matches for the company that year, then poof, Limelight just vanished in a puff of smoke and returned to the independents. Some of Dan's opponents on Dark included now NXT man Ethan Page, Takeshita, and even Mox. Limelight also teamed with Matt and Mike Sydal versus Takeshita, Michael Nakazawa, and Kenny Omega on one edition. The guy shared the ring with some of All Elite's finest then, so at least he can brag about that. Here's the thing though, Danny just flies totally under the radar for all but the most hardcore of AEW fans. Like, you need to be the kind of fan who devours everything that Tony Khan produces to even know who Limelight is. Cool Spider-Man ink though, or maybe it's just a homage to 2000's new metal as cold. I don't know. Number 9, Ray Jazz. Now if you ask me, it is a missed opportunity if this wrestler doesn't go and learn to play the sax and become the world's top wrestling saxophonist. I said what I said. Ray Jazz sounds like somebody who belts out tunes at your local jazz bar. If you have a local jazz bar, that is. I know I don't. Alright, enough stalling and nonsense and more chatter about Ray's AEW stint. Jazz worked 8 matches for the promotion between 2020 and 2022. Again though, like Danny Limelight, all of them happened exclusively on shows like Dark and Dark Elevation. Come on, Tony. Toss the guy a bone and stick him on Rampage or Ring of Honor every now and then, eh? But that just was not meant to be for old Mr. Jazz. His rivals during forays onto AEW programming included Daniel Garcia, Anthony Ogogo, Scorpio Sky, and Bryan Danielson. Well, it was technically Danielson, but more on that to come later. And while we're talking about Dark and Dark Elevation, I want to know right now, what do you think's the best match that ever happened on one of those shows? You let me know in the comment section down below, baby. Number 8, Mel. Now, do you remember the Nightmare Collective headed by Brandy Rhodes? The group could probably be considered one of AEW's worst ideas ever. Certainly in terms of how it was executed on television. Brandy and Awesome Kong were joined by Luther and then Mel as members. And pretty much everything that they did played before crickets. Mel was indie veteran Melanie Cruz. She worked just 5 matches for AEW in 2020, but debuted on Dynamite as an enforcer for the collective at the tail end of 2019. Fans relentlessly bashed the whole thing online, and it was clear to everyone watching shows that Brandy's stable just was not gonna fly. So Mel bowed out with a squash match win over Red Velvet on the 25th of August 2020 edition of Dark. She'd managed just 1 Dynamite bout in her AEW career, a tag team effort with Rhodes versus Hikaru Shida and Chris Statlander on the 15th of January. This was a nondescript and unsatisfying flirt with the big time for Cruz, to say the least, and she now hasn't wrestled since 2022. Number 7, Trench. It's Big Hench Trench, baby. You know, it's actually challenging to find much info on any matches that Trench worked for AEW, despite being tied to a worker who was very recently the AEW World Champion. He was kind of just known as the Big Enforcer with all the face tattoos during a spell in the Mogul affiliate with Swerve Strickland. If you do know Trench, then it's probs as the face tattoo guy who hung around with Swerve and would-be Brock Lesnar impressionist Parker Boudreaux. But let's spit some facts, people. Strickland is much better off on his own, away from hangers-on like this. The Mogul stuff just really did nothing for him, like at all, did it? Just keep him with Nana and let the good times roll. Trench was quietly let go in the summer of 2023, and barely anyone noticed. That's not meant to sound dismissive or cruel to the guy, it's just simply the fact. He didn't actually do much of anything during his years in All Elite, so no one watching the shows really asked what had happened to him when he just stopped showing up to stand around ringside looking mean. Number 6, John Skyler. John Skyler has gone on to receive some praise for his performances in TNA, and good for him, because wrestling under AEW's banner was a bit of a non-event experience for the poor dude. He first started showing up as just another warm body who could work some spots on episodes of Dark in 2020, and Skyler never really progressed beyond that, really. In 14 matches for the group, John stared at the lights, 14 times. Ouch. Now look, wins and losses aren't necessarily everything when you're on the D and E shows like Dark and Dark Elevation, and at least Skyler got to work with the likes of Billy Gunn, Orange Cassidy, Miro, Brian Cage, and many more. All those matches likely stood him in good stead. But Rampage, Collision, and Dynamite were still 1 million miles away. He's hoping that somebody who checked out Dark content got a kick out of what John brought to the dance. His recent match in TNA versus Chris Sabin was definitely worth checking out, and if you haven't already, go and do it. It also looks like Skyler will be booked regularly going forwards. Again, that's very nice to see, but he just wasn't all that memorable in AEW. On a little side note, AEW actually paid John for 7 months whilst he was injured, and gave him access to their own medical team despite the fact that he was never on a full-time contract. And that is a lovely gesture, one which Skyler himself put over in interviews after the fact. Just lovely stuff all around. Cheers for watching this What Culture Wrestling video today, you elite human being. And if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below and you're going to get more of these What Culture Wrestling videos in your life. Number 5, Ace Romero. AEW's fondness for battle royals is well known, and the amount of spots TK needs to fill does sometimes lead to some interesting names popping up. Ace Romero sits neatly in that category after this one-and-done showing at Double or Nothing 2019. He was part of the Casino Royale on the buy-in portion before the main pay-per-view started, and All Elite fans have not been treated to more Ace ever since. Romero was in the heart part of the draw, and managed one elimination before being ousted himself. For the record, Ace chucked Marco's stunt out of the match and ended his world title dreams. What a monster. Marco had the last laugh though when his then pal Jungle Boy eliminated Romero, and the big man then walked off into the sunset. Since then, Ace worked a few years in Impact/TNA and kept his career going on the indie scene too. He actually might be one of the only wrestlers that Tony Khan took a right good look at and decided not to sign/use a couple more times. I mean, there's always one. Number 4, Tiger Huas. Tiger Huas spent a full 6 years in WWE's system as Arturo Huas between 2015 and 2021. Now, you might remember him as one of the extras a super sweaty Shane McMahon talked over during those short-lived Raw Underground segments on the Monday Night flagship. Someone was clearly impressed, because Huas got drafted to Raw in the 2020 draft. WWE then quickly moved him back to NXT and then released him in June 2021. So much for that then. But then AEW came calling, and Tiger ended up trading 6 years in WWE for 6 matches in All Elite. You guessed it, all of them took place on Dark or Dark Elevation. His biggest showing was surely a decent back and forth scrap versus Pac on the 2nd of November 2021 episode. Other than that though, Huas mainly just worked tags. Suddenly being biffed by Dabba Kato and Braun Strowman on Raw Underground didn't actually seem so bad. AEW didn't take up the option to sign Huas full-time, and there's no record of him wrestling anywhere else since 2022. He just vanished. What a strange pro-career all in. Number 3, Baron Black. Baron Black worked more AEW matches than almost anyone else on this list. In total, his haul currently sits at 52. Not bad at all for somebody who wrestled as part of the Dark and Dark Elevation crew. Black did actually get to debut on the A Show though. He lost to Shawn Spears in a short bout on the 29th of April 2020 Dynamite, and it was then off to Dark after that. Baron has had more tag partners than anyone else on the old YouTube programs. Check this out for a list: Tony Donati, Frank Stone, D3, Nick Comarato, Frankie Thomas, VSK, Fuego del Sol, Mike Werner, Royal Money, Sean Dean, Aaron Solo, John Skyler, Umbadu, Tamilian Vanish, and Ryzen. And that is just some of them, not all of them. We'd be here for a week. A lot of those names could have made it into this list themselves, but they either didn't get the early Dynamite or pay-per-view treatments, or just didn't work too many matches on the lower tier shows. Some of them were one-offs too. Now, Black certainly wasn't, but he's still a bit tough to remember unless Dark was appointment viewing for you. Number 2, Infinito. Tony Khan is no stranger to a masked wrestler, but he clearly didn't see enough in Infinito following the Flyers' one and only AEW match versus Ray Jazz on the 30th of November 2021 Dark. That's surprising, because Infinito showed a lot of potential and actually looked like someone who had been wrestling for 20 plus years. Well, that's probably because Bryan Danielson was actually the person under the hood, folks. Yep, that's him. This must have been something that Bryan just fancied doing for a giggle. His jump from AEW has been hugely productive for Danielson, who has been having an absolute hoot since joining the company, and really seems to enjoy the freedom that Tony Khan gives him. And becoming Infinito and wrestling on Dark was seemingly, well, all Bryan. Ray Jazz must have been delighted to wrestle Danielson, hokey gimmick name or not. But the kicker is that a ton of fans actually wouldn't even see Bryan as Infinito. Dark was already a bit of a hardcore fan-only deal, but it started sliding down the pecking order even further once Rampage launched, so loads of people ended up missing the masked American Dragon. Number 1, Warhorse. Warhorse's quartet of AEW matches ranged from unbelievable opportunity to, so much for that. He debuted on the 29th of July 2020 episode of Dynamite versus none other than Cody Rhodes. Cody was pretty giving to old Horsey as well. They went 10 minutes before Rhodes retained his TNT title following a hard-fought match. How did Tony Khan follow up on that? By waiting until November 2021 for Warhorse's next All Elite match, of course. He'd lose to Andrade El Idolo on the 9th of November Dark, then show up again for matches in June 2022. The indie veteran did not repeat his trick by showing up in 2023 though, and he hasn't been spotted on AEW TV in 2024 either. But it was fun for him while it lasted, I suppose. It's likely that nobody out there will ever look back on Cody's AEW career and name-check Warhorse as one of his key opponents. The match happened during the closed-door pandemic days mid-COVID-19, which only makes it even more of a curiosity. What a weird period that was, eh? 4 years ago. Oh man, time does fly. Have you enjoyed this What Culture Wrestling video today, you lovely person? Well, get a load of this latest new show review that's just popped on the What Culture Wrestling podcast channel too. You won't forget that in a hurry, trust me.